Fear is My Co-Pilot is the 21st episode of the 4th season of Cheers, directed, of course, by the wonderful James Burrows, and there will be spoilers from now as I discuss things that happen in this episode. And this one is quite an interesting one for several reasons, but largely because we spend almost half of the episode away from Cheers. In fact, we spend almost half of the episode in the exact same moment, and it doesn't get stale because we have some really fascinating moments between Sam and Diane, but I'll talk about that when we get there chronologically. It starts off rather entertainingly, actually, with Woody saying that he's concerned because it's 5 o'clock, and every day at 5 o'clock somebody comes into the bar and talks his ear off, and Frasier starts to tell him that it's a difficult situation to be in because if he lets that person talk and talk, he will just drone on and everybody disappears because that's exactly what Frasier is doing. But interestingly, we had almost the exact same scenario in a recent episode. I can't remember if it was the previous episode, but certainly very recently, where Diane was talking and talking and talking and Woody ended up leaving the scene. So I think that's quite interesting to highlight that actually Diane and Frasier are, maybe they wouldn't care to admit it, but they are very similar people. And then we have Diane entering Cheers, and I just want to say I love her outfit. It is absolutely gorgeous. And as she's getting ready behind the bar, Sam says that Jack Dalton called. And we learn that Jack Dalton is somebody Diane dated for a little bit when she was in Europe. And we have this moment that honestly made me laugh for about 2 minutes because it happened and then I rewound it to pause it to get a screenshot, and I laughed for quite a long time. And it's when Woody asks Diane, is that before or after you dumped Dr. Crane and sent him into an alcoholic tailspin? And it's just the facial expressions of Diane and Frasier in that moment, absolutely gorgeous. I knew I needed to use this for the thumbnail for this episode, even though it's not one of the key moments. I just found it to be absolutely perfect. We then meet Jack Dalton, played by Joseph Whipp, and he comes into Cheers, he starts greeting everybody, he's spinning everybody around and picking them up, and then he meets Norm, and Norm gestures for him to pick him up, and he just says Norm and shakes his hand instead, which I thought was rather delightful. He then challenges Woody and Sam to arm wrestling competitions. He's clearly an energetic, fun-loving spirit. And this is further confirmed when he invites Diane to go up in his plane. Diane says no. And then eventually Diane says yes, but only if Sam will go up with her. And 12 minutes into the episode, we leave Cheers, and we go up in this plane, and we are there for 11 minutes. It never cuts away from the plane. We don't go back to Cheers until a little later on. And this is something we're seeing happening gradually as the show progresses. We're spending more and more time away from the bar, most likely because they're having bigger budgets as the show gains success and they can afford to build other sets or utilize other locations. And even though we spend 11 minutes looking through the windshield into the front of the plane, it never gets boring. And it starts off with Sam, Diane, and Jack in the plane. Jack goes to check something at the back, so Diane has to take the wheel, which is quite terrifying. But then we have Diane and Sam in the front, and it's really beautiful to see them both together. Jack is taking a little bit longer than anybody would like, so Diane gives Sam the wheel and goes back to check on Jack, and she comes out and declares he's dead. And suddenly they realise they're up in the air with no idea how to fly a plane, and they start to understandably panic that they're going to die, they're going to crash the plane, they're not going to survive. There's this beautiful moment where they're holding each other, their heads are pressed against each other, they're talking about things they'll never get to do. Diane talks about how she'll never have a child, she'll never get married. Sam says, and I quote, "Why didn't I ask you when I had the chance?" And of course they're revealing their heart's deepest desires, and it's not a secret. This is not the first time we've learned that Sam and Diane still very clearly definitely have feelings for each other, but the fact that they're being forced to confront these feelings in a confined space where they're overcome with panic, well, it's actually kind of cruel, because we learn that actually Jack is still alive, and up he pops while they're mid-panic, and we realise that this was something he did on purpose to teach them that life is for living, and that they were doing things rather boringly and safely, and he wanted to show them that actually, now that you've had this near-death experience, everything is going to be more amazing. And it's a horrible, horrible, nasty trick to play. And I like the fact that they didn't just take it lying down, and they did take action after that. And the rest of the episode, the last couple of minutes, are in cheers. And Sam was rather adorable as everybody's leaving one by one, and Diane is in the back room for a moment, and Sam realizes he's on his own, and he panics, and he says, "Don't leave me here with..." Of course, he's talking to nobody because nobody's there, and the end of his sentence drifts off as Diane enters the room again. And I think it's quite telling that Sam doesn't want to be left alone with Diane because he doesn't want to admit the things he said as being truthful. He doesn't want to admit his feelings, and actually, neither does Diane. And she says that they should, for now, forget about the things that they said. And yet again, they are unwilling to talk about their true feelings for one another, and they're just putting them to the side. And that's how the episode ends. But it's definitely ending on a note that suggests there's more to come for Sam and Diane. Now, I know what happens in future episodes, but I won't spoil it just in case you haven't seen those. But it's definitely an interesting episode. As we're progressing through season 4, they are increasingly being faced with situations where they're made to confront their emotions for each other. A few episodes back, we had that gorgeous outburst from Frasier where he was just yelling at them, telling them they're basically being children for not admitting their feelings to each other, and increasingly they're being forced to admit these feelings. And I think the development and the pacing for this is really, really effective. We are coming towards the end of the season, unfortunately, and I don't want to say any more than that, but it's definitely a very important episode. It's also interesting that we spend, as I said, about 11 minutes, so almost half of an episode, away from Cheers. And it works very well. I do think that having most of the episodes set in the bar is better because we get more characters and more interactions, but every now and then it's nice to cut away, have a different environment, different scenarios, and allowing us to see the characters and how they respond to different situations. It's a nice look at Sam and Diane for sure, and this episode is really, really entertaining. Fear is My Co-Pilot is a brilliant story, definitely very funny for the first half, and then the second half is very dramatic. We have a very sudden shift in tone, but it's very effective, and ultimately it's an episode that I really enjoyed.